300 names. That's the headline. But headlines are camouflage.
Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi has finally released the Epstein list, a collection of 300 politicians and prominent people who were named in the files, telling Congress that all the documents the Department of Justice was required to reveal have now been made public, Kinsey.
What was just released isn't clarity. It's volatility disguised as transparency. The Attorney General announced that the so-called Epstein list, roughly 300 politicians, executives, celebrities, has now been fully disclosed, satisfying what the Department of Justice was required to reveal. Required. That word should stop you, because when government institutions emphasize compliance, it usually means they are bracing for backlash. Here's the first destabilizing reality. A name appearing in investigative files is not evidence of a crime. It is proximity, association, sometimes nothing more than a phone number scribbled in a contact book. And yet the public reaction is instantaneous. Screenshots circulate, reputations ignite, careers tremble.
Public, Kinsey. Are there big names that are going to be worried about this release?
I mean, I think we had this conversation last week where Joe Rogan was like, look, I'm on the list and because I refuse to meet with him. And that's what we're seeing, a lot of pushback, because there are a lot of names. Meghan Markle's on this list. There are a lot of names on this list, and they are people that in no way, shape, or form had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
So ask yourself, is this justice unfolding or chaos being triggered? We've already seen prominent figures preemptively defend themselves, podcasters, media personalities, public figures saying, yes, my name is there, but I refuse to meet him. That's the point. Jeffrey Epstein didn't operate in darkness. He cultivated light, power, access. He embedded himself in rooms filled with influence so that mere association could later serve as leverage. That's how predators scale, not through secrecy alone, but through saturation. Now the tension sharpens, because once 300 names are public, nuance collapses. The legal system asks one question: is there proof of criminal participation? The internet asks a different one: why were you there at all? Those are not the same inquiry. And when those standards blur, the damage spreads far beyond the guilty. This is where things get more dangerous than they look. Epstein's network spanned politics, finance, royalty, entertainment. That's not conspiracy. That's documented history. The real investigative burden has always been evidence of offenses: financial records, flight logs, witness testimony, corroborated timelines. Without that, a name is smoke, not fire. But smoke changes behavior. It forces statements. It pressures institutions to distance themselves before facts are fully adjudicated. And that pressure creates fractures. Consider what's unfolding across the Atlantic.
Sources told the UK Times that King Charles did not contribute to the £12 million payout made by his brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, to settle a case brought against him by Virginia Giuffre, who accused the former prince of having sex with her when she was just 17 years old.
Reports indicate that King Charles did not personally contribute to the multi-million-pound settlement paid by his brother, Prince Andrew, in response to allegations that he engaged in sexual conduct with a minor trafficked by Epstein. That financial distinction is now being emphasized with surgical precision. Why? Because money signals responsibility. If the monarch funded the settlement, critics argue it could imply institutional shielding. If he did not, the palace reinforces the narrative that Andrew's legal liabilities are his alone. That separation isn't symbolic. It's existential for a monarchy already navigating erosion of public trust. And here's the escalation. The royal family doesn't survive scandal by debating morality. It survives by containing liability. Andrew has been publicly exiled from royal duties, titles stripped, appearances minimized. The strategy is isolation.
Crown's credibility. And again, exile, exile, exile. We don't want to see Andrew. We don't want to hear from him. And it's my understanding he's currently under investigation and potentially in trouble for sharing government secrets. So it might not be so easy to get rid of him.
But exile doesn't erase association. It merely confines it. And when the king himself is heckled publicly, asked when he knew about his brother's connections, that signals something far deeper than embarrassment. It signals weakening insulation. Monarchies rely on mystique, on distance, on the illusion of permanence. Public heckling punctures that. It reframes the crown from untouchable to accountable. That shift may seem subtle. It isn't. And the risk compounds. Because Andrew reportedly faces additional scrutiny related to sensitive communications. If further investigations widen, the palace's strategy of financial separation may not be enough. Distancing works only if the scandal remains contained. If it expands, proximity becomes political. That's how institutions decay, not in a single collapse, but in incremental reputational fractures. Now step back. What do we see? A powerful financier cultivated elites across continents. Years later, the exposure of those connections destabilizes political careers, media reputations, even royal legitimacy. And yet, the legal threshold remains narrow. Prove the crime. That tension between public outrage and prosecutable evidence is combustible. And while that storm brews, another dynamic unfolds in parallel. Celebrity culture absorbing scandal and monetizing vulnerability. An actress posts a selfie in front of a crying corner banner on her first Valentine's Day after divorce. It's framed as relatability, processing pain publicly, turning heartbreak into content. But pause. When did private grief become performance currency?
To me, celebrities today, they monetize their failure, and sharing messy life transformations, I guess it strengthens audience connection. So I don't know. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say she's trying to relate to her audience, but a little piece of me feels like, she's trying to get that money, honey. She knows it'll attract a lot of likes and clicks.
This isn't trivial. It reflects a broader transformation in how public figures manage reputation under scrutiny. Instead of silence, they flood the feed. Instead of retreat, they curate. Emotional exposure becomes insulation. If you confess first, critics lose leverage. That strategy mirrors what we just discussed on a different scale. Control the narrative before it controls you. In the case of the comedian, previous posts, provocative, unfiltered, intentionally messy, drew criticism. There were pivots, adjustments, content recalibrated, not because authenticity vanished, but because brand survival demanded adaptation. This is reputation management in the digital age, and it operates with ruthless efficiency. Here's the connective tissue you might not expect. Whether it's a monarchy separating finances from scandal, a public figure preemptively addressing their name on a list, or a celebrity reframing divorce as empowerment, each move is about narrative containment. Because once narrative escapes control, consequences multiply. But containment has limits. When investigative files are released en masse, institutions gamble on transparency restoring trust. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it accelerates suspicion, especially when the public suspects more exists than what was disclosed. And that suspicion is corrosive. If the Department of Justice states that all required documents are now public, skeptics will ask, required by whom? Determined by what criteria? Were redactions made? Were peripheral associations separated from substantive allegations? Those questions don't disappear because a press release says, complete. And here's where the stakes escalate again. In high-profile cases involving powerful networks, partial transparency can be more destabilizing than silence. Because it invites amateur investigation, crowdsourced accusation, viral misinterpretation, that environment doesn't produce justice, it produces spectacle. Yet spectacle reshapes politics. Reputations influence elections. Public trust influences institutional authority. If enough citizens believe elite circles operate with impunity, even absent proof, that belief alone alters civic cohesion. It erodes confidence in equal application of law. That erosion is subtle at first, then it becomes systemic. So what happens next? Investigators will continue focusing on evidence, financial trails, corroborated testimony, documented participation. That's the sober path. But the cultural reaction will move faster. It always does. Careers will be questioned, invitations withdrawn, boards reconsidered. Some names will weather it, others won't. And in the monarchy's case, survival depends on convincing the public that scandal is compartmentalized, that one man's conduct does not implicate the institution. History suggests that strategy can work if no further revelations emerge. But history also warns that hidden associations rarely stay buried. We are watching the aftershocks of a network built on access and immunity. Now that access is under a microscope, immunity is under suspicion, and institutions that once appeared insulated are being forced into defensive posture. This is not about gossip. It's about how power responds when exposed. Does it clarify? Does it conceal? Does it fragment? 300 names were released, but the real story isn't the list. It's the pressure it creates across systems, legal, political, cultural. Because when influence intersects with exploitation, the fallout doesn't remain contained to a courtroom. It ripples through trust itself. And trust, once destabilized, doesn't reset easily. Stay vigilant about the difference between allegation and proof. But also, stay alert to how institutions maneuver when proximity to scandal threatens their legitimacy. The next developments won't arrive quietly, and if you're not paying attention when they do, you'll miss the signals that something larger is shifting beneath the surface.